Dumb Husky and His White Cat Shizun is a BL novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. Descriptive violence and triggers for sensitive content. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 26. This venerable one's first meeting with him. As the sun rose higher, more and more people came to the inn. Amoran felt that it was noisy downstairs, so he asked the waiter to bring the prepared dishes to his room. In the end, he invited Chu Wanning. After all, Shizun was the oldest, and he was not the emperor of the mortal world, so he had to abide by the rules. 3 bowls of steaming hot noodle soup were placed on the table made of beech wood. The noodle soup was made by himself and was different from the ones bought outside. It was smooth, with thick cut beef slices, oily fat sausages, fresh and tender pea sprouts, plump vegetables, and golden shredded eggs. The color of the noodle soup was bright and attractive, and it was placed beautifully. However, the most outstanding part of the 3 bowls of noodles was not the water leaves, nor was it the large chunks of meat, nor was it the luxurious seasoning. Instead, it was the bone broth that had been simmered for 4 hours, and was poured into the noodle bowl. The milky white soup was floating with sesame red oil. Amoran used a stone bowl to grind a spicy seasoning, and boiled it into the soup. The aroma wafted through the noodle, and the taste was rich. He pondered that Shimei loved spicy food, and the red oil and chili oil were well prepared. Seeing that Shimei was engrossed in the food, Amoran's smile became more and more cheerful. He stole a few glances and couldn't help but ask, "Is it delicious?" Shimei replied, "It's especially delicious." Chu Wanning didn't say anything. He still had the same gloomy expression as if the heavens owed him 100 mountains of gold and silver. Amoran revealed a smug expression. "Then whenever you want to eat, just let me know and I'll do it." Shimei's spicy eyes were covered with a thin layer of mist. He raised his eyes and smiled at Amoran, his eyebrows filled with gentleness. The beauty was in front of him. If it weren't for the ice-cold Chu Wanning sitting next to him, Amoran wouldn't have been able to decide whether he should eat Shimei or the noodles in his bowl. Pea sprouts, fat sausages. Shimei didn't eat much, but the beef and vegetables quickly bottomed out. Amoran, who had been observing silently from the side, reached out his chopsticks and pulled the pea sprouts and fat sausages into his bowl. He then picked up a few pieces of beef from his bowl to fill in the gaps. The disciples of the Summit of Life and Death ate at Granny Meng's hall. They often exchanged dishes with each other, so Shimei didn't find it strange. He smiled. "Aaron don't eat beef." "Yes, I like to eat pea sprouts." As he spoke, he lowered his head and started snoring. His ears were pointed, and there was a slight redness to them. Chu Wanning picked up the pea sprouts in his bowl and threw them into Amoran's bowl. "I don't eat pea sprouts." Then, he threw all the beef in his bowl to Shimei. "You don't eat beef either." Then, he furrowed his brows and stared at the leftovers in his bowl. He pursed his lips and remained silent. Shimei asked cautiously, "Shizun, is it not to your liking?" He didn't answer. He lowered his head and picked up a piece of vegetable. After taking a small bite, his expression turned even uglier. With a snap, he put down his chopsticks. "Amoran, did you knock the jar of hot sauce into the soup?" Amoran didn't expect that the breakfast he had painstakingly prepared would be interrupted by such a remark. He looked up with a piece of noodles hanging from the corner of his mouth. He blinked innocently at Chu Wanning, finding it hard to believe his ears. So, he swallowed the noodles and said, "What?" Chu Wanning didn't give him any face this time. "Are you cooking something that humans can eat?" Amoran blinked his eyes a few more times. Finally, he was sure that Chu Wanning was scolding him. He couldn't help but ask angrily, "How come it's not something that humans can eat?" Chu Wanning's eyebrows twitched. He said harshly, "It's really hard to swallow." Amoran choked. After all, he had stolen his skills from the intoxicated Jade Pavilion. "Shizun, you're too picky." Shimei also said, "Shizun, you haven't eaten for a whole day. Even if you don't like it, you should at least eat some." Chu Wanning stood up and said coldly, "I don't like spicy food." With that, he turned around and left. The two people who remained in front of the table fell into an awkward silence. Shimei was a little surprised. "Shizun doesn't like spicy food?" "I don't know." "Aaron, don't you know?" "I." Amoran stared at the noodles that Chu Wanning had left on the table. He didn't eat a single bite, and after a while, he nodded. "Yes. I don't know." This was a lie. Amoran knew that Chu Wanning didn't like spicy food. It was just that he had forgotten. After all, he had been entangled with this person for most of his life. He knew what Chu Wanning liked to eat and what he didn't like to eat. But he didn't care, and he didn't remember. When he returned to his room, Chu Wanning put on his clothes and lay down, facing the wall. He opened his eyes, but he couldn't fall asleep. He had lost a lot of blood and consumed a lot of his spiritual energy. After an entire night and morning, he hadn't even eaten a single grain of rice. In fact, his stomach had long been empty, and it was very uncomfortable. This person didn't know how to take care of himself. When he was in a bad mood, he simply didn't eat, as if he felt that his stomach would be full if he was angry. He didn't know what he was angry about, or rather, he didn't want to know. However, in the silence, a face appeared in front of him. It had a bright smile, a slight curl at the corners of its mouth, and a pair of bright black eyes. It was a gentle, deep purple color. It looked warm and lazy. Chu Wanning gripped the mattress tightly, because he had used too much force. His knuckles were slightly white. He wasn't willing to sink into it. He closed his eyes, wanting to get rid of this face that was laughing recklessly. But after he closed his eyes, the past became even more turbulent, surging into his heart like a tide. The first time he saw Amoran was in front of the Tower of Babel at the summit of life and death. On that day, the sun was shining brightly. All 20 elders were gathered, and they were talking to each other in low voices. Elder Yuhang was naturally an exception. He wasn't that stupid to be willing to stand there and bask in the sun. Instead, he had long since hidden under a flowering tree, absent-mindedly lifting one of his fingers, checking to see if the black iron nail glove he had made could be extended and extended freely. Of course, he didn't need to use the nail glove at all. This set of armor was specially made for the low-level disciples of the summit of life and death. The lower cultivation realm was adjacent to the world of spirits and souls, so it wasn't uncommon for low-level disciples to be injured and lose their lives. Chu Wanning saw this, but although he didn't say it out loud, he had been racking his brains to think of a way to solve the problem. He wanted to make a weapon that was light, flexible, and easy to use. The others were discussing it with great interest. "Have you heard? The High Lord's long-lost nephew had been rescued from the Sea of Fire. Everyone else in the building that ran into the water died. If the High Lord had been a step late, that nephew would have been reduced to ashes. He's really lucky." His father must have been protecting the child from the shadows. It's a pity that he was separated when he was young and suffered so much. AI. That child's name is Moran? He's already 15, right? It's time for a weak crown to have a character. Does he have a character? Elder Suanji, you don't know this, but this child grew up in a music hall. It's already good enough for him to have a name. How could he have a character? I heard that the High Lord has given him a few characters, and he's currently choosing one. I wonder which one he'll choose in the end. The Honorable Lord really values his nephew. Isn't that so? Let alone the High Lord, even the High Lord's wife feels sorry for him. Heh, I think the only one who's unhappy at the summit of life and death is probably our heaven's chosen. Elder Tan Lang. You can't just say that. Haha. I've misspoken. However, our heaven's chosen is unrestrained and doesn't put his elders in his eyes. He's always fighting with chickens and dogs, as if he's born to be rich. He's indeed out of line. Elder Tan Lang, you've drunk too much today. The person next to him gave him a look and pointed his chin at Chu Wanning, who was standing in the distance. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. The heavens chosen Xuemeng was Chu Wanning's disciple. If he said that Xuemeng was out of line, wasn't he just mocking Chu Wanning for not teaching him well? This elder Yuhang, despite his usual leisurely manner, seemed like a celestial being, as if he was floating above the mortal world. He had the style of an expert. However, everyone knew that he had an extremely bad temper. If anyone accidentally touched his reverse scale, they would have to wash their necks and wait to be whipped to death. Chu Wanning had heard their conversation long ago. However, he couldn't be bothered with them. He was probably not as interested in what others would say about him as the patterns on his fingernails. This armor was good, but it wasn't tough enough. If he encountered a demon with thick skin, he might not be able to tear open his flesh with a single blow. If he went back and added some dragon bone powder, the effect would be better. Seeing that Chu Wanning didn't respond, the elders heaved a sigh of relief and began to discuss in low voices. The Honorable Lord summoned us here today because you want to choose a master for Mo child, right? That's strange. Why didn't the Honorable Lord teach him himself? It seems that my nephew's constitution isn't suitable for the Honorable Lord's cultivation. Someone muttered, but that doesn't mean that all the elders should be gathered here and let the young master pick one by one, right? Elder Lucan let out a sigh as he smoothed his long, elegant hair and complained, I feel like I'm a cheap cabbage that's sitting on the table, waiting for young Master Mo to pick it out. So, could this sissy not speak the truth so bluntly? After waiting for a while, the Honorable Lord finally arrived. He walked up the 1,000 steps and arrived in front of the Tower of Babel with a young man following behind him. Chu Wanning only casually glanced at him, but before he could see clearly, he turned his gaze away and continued to study his fingernails. He couldn't be bothered to take a second look. When it came to accepting someone as his master, he had to talk about how unconventional the summit of life and death was, and how unstoppable it was. In other sects, the master would always be high and mighty. He would rub the head of a new disciple and say, young man, I see that you're quite intelligent. From today onwards, you're my disciple. The disciple didn't even have the chance to say no. The master's face would be cold and full of disdain. He would wave his sleeves and say, young man, your skull is too high, your eyes are lifeless, and the back of your head is not what my disciple should look like. You're not fated with me, so I won't accept you as my disciple. Then, the disciple didn't even have the time to express himself before the master flew away on his sword, running faster than a dog. The summit of life and death was different. The master and the disciple made a mutual choice. What did that mean? The summit of life and death had 20 elders. After all the disciples entered the sect, after a period of interaction and comparison, they would be able to sincerely hand over their master's invitation, expressing their desire to follow the elder in cultivation. If the elder accepted it, then everyone would be happy. If the elder didn't accept it, the disciple could pester and pester him until the elder softened or the disciple gave up. Logically speaking, Chu Wanning's skills were superb and his appearance was handsome. There should be a lot of people in the sect, and all the disciples would want to take him as their master. But that wasn't the case. Chu Wanning's face was handsome, but his temper was so bad that it made one's hair stand on end. It was said that when he was angry, he would beat up his female disciples as if they were male disciples, and even sink his male disciples into the pond. Shizun was such a person that not many people had the courage to take him as their master. As a result, Elder Yuheng's disciple was deserted. Apart from the chosen one, Shuemeng, and Shuemeng's good friend, Shimei, he had never taken anyone in. Everyone would rather respectfully address him as elder, rather than affectionately address him as Shizun. Chu Wanning had a cold look on his face, saying that he wasn't upset. He lowered his head and continued to toss out the cold mechanic weapons. Whether it was the sleeve quiver or the sentinel, they were all designed for others. The earlier they were done, the earlier more people would be spared from suffering. As a result, he didn't expect that Emoran would choose him without any hesitation. At that time, he was frowning as he rubbed the spikes on his finger sheath, thinking about how to improve it. He didn't pay attention to what the High Lord had said to everyone. Unknowingly, the surroundings had gradually quieted down. Chu Wanning, who had finished thinking about the formula for improving the spikes, suddenly realized that the surroundings had been a little too quiet. As a result, he finally moved his gaze away from his finger sheath and raised his eyelids with a hint of impatience and inquiry. Then he saw a face. Under the sunlight, it was so bright that it was almost blinding. It was a handsome young man who was looking up at him. The young man's lips curled up into a lazy, faintly discernible smile. The dimples on his cheeks were deep, giving him the air of a commoner, but also a hint of innocence. A pair of black and purple eyes were staring at him without blinking, a mixture of eagerness and curiosity. He was new here, so he didn't know the rules. The distance between them was so close that it could almost be called rude. A person suddenly appeared a short distance away. Chu Wanning was shocked, as if he had been scalded. He subconsciously took a step back, and with a bang, his head hit a tree trunk. The young man's eyes widened slightly. "Aya! Chu Wanning, what are you doing?" The young man laughed. Immortal Master, I've been looking at you for a long time. Why are you ignoring me?" End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.